In the hallowed realms of the celestial plane, nestled deep within the intricate weave of the cosmos, a spectacle of extraordinary magnitude unfolds. An event so momentous, it stills the very pulse of creation. The Defendant is no fleeting mortal, but the Archduke of Hell himself, Asmodeus, a former and now fallen archangel whose darkness and cunning had formed the Nine Hells of Baator. Shrouded in an aura of swirling shadows and radiant evil, Asmodeus now stands on the altar of cosmic justice, accused of high crimes against the heavens. Deceit, torture, and cruelty were among the charges decreed by the gods of Mount Celestia. It's the Trial of Asmodeus, right now on Riches and Liches. Welcome, adventurers. I'm Rich, and this is Riches and Liches, dedicated to dungeons, dragons, and tales of lore. As a continuation of our Volume 4 ending on the Pact Primeval, today we cover the Trial of Asmodeus, as recounted by the Scribe of the Damned, Griley Tomekeeper of Candlekeep, his accounting of the facts that unfolded so many millennia ago. Charged with manipulation and corruption of mortal souls in order to power the Nine Hells, Asmodeus stands before the Celestial Court, the outcome of which not only shaped the Nine Hells as we know them, but planted a seed that eventually brought into the infernal fold a new and current ruler of one of the Baatorian planes. This should be good, so let's get to it, but quickly, could I ask you wizards of lore out there to cast Bigby's hand in order to press those subscribe and like buttons so I can keep producing these videos for years to come? It really does help with the RNG of the dice roll that is the YouTube algorithm. Thank you. And now I present to you our iconic lore mega series on the Nine Hells, Volume 4, Celestial Court Chaos. Cloaked in an ambience of sinister poise, Asmodeus found himself presented before the scales of lawful justice. Charged with transgressions of a cosmic magnitude, the accused, the infernal sovereign himself, carried an air of calm, even certainty that bordered on arrogance. An ever-imposing figure, the Lord of the Nine Hells was draped in magnificent, opulent, and lavish red robes, his radiant evil aura a stark silhouette against the iridescent white halo that bathed this grand, heavenly courtroom. His eyes, twin orbs of liquid crimson, pulsed an unholy light, their depth surely holding the secrets of a million tortured souls. A confident, sinister smile played upon his lips, a most unsettling counterpoint to these divine surroundings. At the helm of this extraordinary courtroom drama, now prepared to unfold, was Primus, the ultimate being of impartiality, an entity of godlike neutrality hailing from Mechanist, the plane of unmitigated order, and leader of the Modrons. His form was inscrutable, cold, and calculating, his presence palpable on the senses. Primus was the embodiment and definition of absolute law, a fact well known by Asmodeus, and at the core of why the Lord of the Nine agreed to, even suggested, his ultimate authority over these proceedings. Primus' unerring gaze, like the steady spin of galaxies, beheld the Archduke of Baator with no trace of emotion, his voice cold, steady, and devoid of empathy or bias, echoed through this ethereal expanse.
Asmodeus, you stand here on this day accused of willfully corrupting the mortals of the material plane, and twisting the paths of their souls to the realm of sin and punishment, all performed with deceptive and manipulative tactics in order to fortify your kingdom and your own enrichment. How do you plead?
Asmodeus, his figure radiating a defiant arrogance, responded with a voice that held both the chill and command of Hell's deepest abyss.
I am most certainly not guilty, great beacon of neutrality. I tread only the paths the gods have themselves forged, and have not broken any of the tenets of our agreement, our pact, agreed upon and sealed by celestial law. These mortals in question are not victims, but willful volunteers, enticed only by their own insatiable ambition, and we follow only the outlines and directives of these agreements. We should not be placed on trial for enforcing the terms of a contract signed and mutually agreed upon, just because of regret when payment is due. Every soul that etches their name on a pact with the Batazu is inducted into our infernal legions, all in defense of the cosmos. They become the very shields of law, fighting off the infinite chaotic monstrosity of the abyss. Together we stand as the primary barricade, preserving cosmic equilibrium to the great benefit of all within these proceedings, I might add, including those that seek to incriminate me on this very day.
These audacious claims coursed through the courtroom, stirring a tempest of murmurs and sending ripples of unease and even anger across the celestial gathering, as the prosecution, a legion of gods and angels, prepared their rebuttals to the Lord of Lies' twisting of words and facts. As the Lord of the Hells calmly and confidently completed his own testimony, Primus turned to what seemed to be an endless audience of gods and angels, all awaiting their turn to be heard. With a formal and unblinking nod from Primus, thus began the march of divine witness. Countless celestial entities took to the stand, first the major gods from all the lawful realms, followed by minor deities, each voicing their condemnations through experiences and observations of the Batazu, Asmodeus' cruel legions. Primus stoically listened and considered all for many hours. Those hours turned to days, and days into weeks, as this near-infinite damning cavalcade continued. Many angels gave witness to tales of deceit, manipulation, and the horrific, vile methods of mortal soul extraction echoed through the divine courtroom. However, despite the mounting accusations, Asmodeus remained resolute, unyielding, confident. His defense was unwavering, his continued answers and arguments constant and compelling. His devils were not the villains, but the facilitators of the very laws the gods created, their actions a requisite evil to keep the greater terrors of the abyss in check. In time, the repetitious angelic testimonies began to exhaust even the godlike patience of Primus, and yet the line of those desirous to share their accusations and experiences seemed unending. Deciding that the court had heard sufficient accounts, Primus signaled for the end of testimonies despite the rumblings of the discontent from those that had yet to share or give witness. But amid the low grumblings of angelic discontent, there was one particular celestial entity who hadn't been granted her chance to speak, and she would not be deterred. Zariel, a radiant and beautiful solar of significant renown as a frontline warrior angel in the celestial war against chaos, she of passionate fire and indomitable spirit rose to her feet, charging to the front of the massive celestial court. Her voice rang out like a celestial trumpet.
My testimony shall be heard.
Asmodeus gazed upon the solar with an obvious look of intrigue as an eyebrow raised ever so slightly and a smile turned on his infernal lips, the wheels of his ever-conniving and cunning mind in full thought. Zariel's proclamation and disregard for the decorum of these proceedings ignited a conflagration of chaos among the Celestials in attendance. Accusations flew like divine sparks among the angels and the gods alike. Righteous anger crackled in the air, and the courtroom erupted into a storm of celestial dissent among the countless others who had also yet to give their account. As these heavenly entities descended into infighting, Asmodeus' smile widened, his dark amusement obvious as he reveled in the turmoil that had just spawned. After several long minutes, and in the eye of this divine tempest, Primus stood, his cold, calculating gaze felt upon each and every being within range. Primus stared into the void for what seemed like hours, his facial expression absent of any clue, but clearly assessing all he had seen and heard. As Primus re-engaged the courtroom, he first calmly admonished the Celestials for their lack of order and disciplined respect for these proceedings. He then flatly stated that he had considered all facts and testimony, and his ruling would be that while not absolved of any wrongdoing, there would be no formal judgment against Asmodeus. He did, however, decree an impartial and fair solution awash in the aura of neutrality. The god of Mechanus bestowed or obliged upon Asmodeus, depending upon your source, a ruby rod, a divine artifact resonating with absolute law. This ruby rod, an infernal tool, a celestial caution, perhaps both. For this mighty artifact both established the eternal right for the Batazu to forge pacts with mortals, while also serving as a grave censure and punishment device for any devils that do not respect the strictures of the bargains they make or defy the terms of their sacred contracts. To Asmodeus, this was not a restraint, but a scepter. Not a leash, but a declaration. All to his power and might within the cosmic hierarchy. Primus's voice, as cold and unyielding as the void between stars, echoed again throughout the courtroom.
This trial is concluded.
With these words, the courtroom fell into a solemn silence, order finally taking precedence once more. The celestial beings regrouped, their fiery hearts subdued by the ruling of a god. Even the ever-burning Zariel fell quiet, her spark momentarily dimmed. And amidst the hush, the dark silhouette of Asmodeus stood, detached from the shadows of the courtroom. His eyes held the victorious glint of a predator, a victor in the brutal game of cosmic law. While no claim of innocence was decided, in a legal sense, this celestial acquittal was a complete victory for Asmodeus nonetheless. The Archduke of Hell stood unscathed, his infernal grin stretching wider across his countenance as he ran his hands across the cold iron of this new, unholy symbol, its crimson aura pulsating in rhythm with his dark, triumphant heart. Thus concluded the grand trial of Asmodeus. The celestial courtroom had been his stage, the celestial beings his audience, and Primus his predictable referee. In this divine theater, amidst the grand narratives of law, chaos, and order, the dark symphony of Asmodeus's machinations continue to resonate. His vile melody threads throughout the cosmos, a wicked and vile final testament to his role in the grand scheme of creation and damnation. Every soul ensnared, every pact made, every torment inflicted was a piece of his grand puzzle, one that spanned mortal ambition, infernal cunning, and divine law. As his dark symphony continued to play, Asmodeus reveled in the melody. His part in the cosmic order was not over, it was only just beginning. Moving from long ago to more recent times, the celestial courtroom now faded into the past. A different setting emerges into our view. The backdrop, a grand chamber in Nessus, the ninth layer of these hells, dimly lit with a sanguine light, its shadows dancing with the unspoken secrets of these planes. Asmodeus reveled and reflected on the aftermath of the story he just told, as an aged scribe furiously writes in his precious tome, diligently recording the story that Asmodeus weaved, his hands shaking in both excitement and fear. The tale of the cosmic trial still fresh, swirling between them like a phantom wisp. As Asmodeus recounted, his fingers traced the lines of the ruby rod, the artifact pulsing with an ominous glow that reflected off his infernal eyes.
An enchanting tale, isn't it?
Asmodeus murmured, a wicked smile playing on his lips.
I've seen it retold countless times in the mortal realm, adapted into their little plays. They perform it with such conviction, such fervor, each version more imaginative than the last.
Griley nodded, his eyes never leaving the parchment.
Indeed, Lord Asmodeus, the tale has been interpreted in many ways, each version hoping to decipher the truth. Each outcome is diverse as the stars in the cosmos.
Asmodeus let out a low chuckle, his gaze focused upon the ruby rod.
Truth, Tomekeeper, is subjective, don't you think? Some tales reflect reality, mirroring past events with a stark accuracy, but others, they're no more than fanciful illusions spun from the wishful thinking of those who once accused me.
His words hung heavy in the air, a shroud of cryptic mystery that seemed to envelop the room. Griley's hand paused for the very first time as he slowly looked up from his pages. The Archduke's gaze met the scribe's, the corner of his lips curled in a subtle, knowing smile. His fingers tapped gently against the ruby rod.
Remember, Tomekeeper, don't believe everything you're told. Not every tale holds true, whether spoken by men or even gods. Especially...
He paused, glancing at the ruby rod once more.
When it comes to artifacts of great power, their origins, their purpose.
Griley instinctively gripped his quill so hard it nearly broke. The meaning of Asmodeus's words, though shrouded, rang clear to him. The tale he had just penned might not have been as accurate as he had assumed, at least as it concerns the legendary artifact known as the Ruby Rod. Griley knew better than to ask the question that now burned upon his lips. With a nod, he placed his quill down, acknowledging the inherent wisdom in Asmodeus's advice and also knowing their time had once again come to an end.
Of course, Lord Asmodeus,
he replied, closing his tome.
I will remember your words.
With a satisfied nod, Asmodeus rose from his seat, his figure swallowed by the dancing shadows. His voice echoed through the chamber one last time as the faint and now familiar glow of plane shift magic enveloped the scribe. As Griley felt his body and mind returning to the material plane once again, he heard the Lord of the Nine's final words until he is called upon again.
That's all one can do, my little scribe. Keep the story alive, but always question the story told.
And so ends the story of the Trial of Asmodeus, straight from Volume 4, The Accounting of the Scribe of the Damned himself. I know we did things a little different this time, unconventional as a full story narrative, but the Trial of Asmodeus is not a well-covered subject in the lore of Dungeons & Dragons, and I wanted to make sure we covered it. But as an historical event with very little coverage or conflict, it's generally only mentioned as a play steeped in some level of truth and artistic license, depending upon your own beliefs. But as such, it's not something we really need to tear down or can kind of homebrew. But again, an important part of the lore and the origin story of the Nine Hells, as it really rounds out all of the backstory and setup that we needed so we can now enter the Nine Hells proper, starting next week in Volume 5. But in any event, I have recounted for you those events straight from the tome of Griley Tomekeeper. It seemed appropriate, but do let me know what you thought. But we're not done yet. As always, Fiendish facts are on deck. We've covered so much, but there's so much more that yet remains. I want to produce the Library of Congress in terms of Dungeons and Dragons lore. And to do that, please consider supporting the work with a YouTube or Patreon subscription or a super thanks so that I can do this full time at some point in the future and ensure we can continue this series to its conclusion and beyond. Thank you. Now I have 2 Fiendish facts to share with you today. First up, Fiendish fact number 5. This fact seems fitting given the trial we just covered, but you might be surprised to learn that the Devils of Baator have a very complex legal system, modeled and mirroring the very system in place on the mortal realms, complete with trials conducted by infernal judges, prosecutors, and even representatives defending the accused. All of this culminating in sentenced punishments that range from eternal torment to rehabilitation, which I can assure you, from a mortal's perspective, is much worse than it sounds. This diabolical court, this judiciary system of the Nine Hells, it's run by Belial, co-ruler of Phlegethos, the fourth layer. Belial, ever the patient, diplomatic statesman of the Nine Hells, chairs this infernal system of justice, while his lover, sister, daughter, really depends upon your source, Fierna, runs the actual day-to-day business of soul collection in this fiery lair. We will of course cover this and many other facets of Phlegethos in an upcoming volume dedicated to the fourth layer. But you have to give it up for the Batazu. They really do take their lawful alignment seriously. However, I don't think probation is available for your mortal soul, but I do know I don't want to find out. Fiendish fact number 6. According to the common held lore and hinted at in our earlier retelling, the Trial of Asmodeus, in addition to its far-reaching implications for the fate of mortal souls, also played a critical role in the ascension of a current ruler of one of the domains of hell. We'll go into all the details when we dedicate an entire volume to Avernus, but Zariel, the fiery and warmongering Solar who caused such a ruckus during the trial, first impressed Asmodeus with her passion and constant rebellion against her divine superiors in that very trial. Years to centuries later, depending upon your source, there's quite a few conflicts in the timeline of this lore, but at some point, Zariel was captured, corrupted, and ultimately recruited to lead the infernal forces against the Tanar'ri after her defeat in Avernus as part of the Hell Riders of El Turel. You might have gathered some of that lore in the Descent to Avernus module, but we'll be going even deeper, so much more on that coming soon. And so concludes Volume 4. You won't want to miss Volume 5. Our backstory is mostly complete, so in Volume 5, we will start our journey into the Hells proper, beginning with the economy of souls in Hell, how devils come to be, and how petitioners are promoted in the strict hierarchy of Hell. I hope you're enjoying our journey so far. So much more to cover. Please consider following on Twitter at Riches and Liches, checking out our Patreon, Discord, YouTube channel memberships for as little as $2 or a super thanks, the equivalent of buying that bar to drink at the local tavern for a tale well told. And if you feel like I earned it, sub and ring that bell to help me conquer my own big bad evil guy, that YouTube algorithm. Thanks for listening, and until next time, remember, the only limitation at your table is your imagination.